Primal Fear with Rulebreaker. Rulebreaker! How did they break the rules on this album? They really didn't. I mean, it's just the title of the release. But these guys have been prominent in the power metal slash straight up heavy metal scene for quite a while now, since the latter portion of the 1990s. In fact, the rumor is, and there could be truth to this, I have no way of confirming, I don't know the man, that Ralph started the band after he did not get the gig as the Judas Priest frontman whenever Rob Halford left. That, of course, went to Ripper Owens. Whatever. I mean, truth or not, it would still be a pretty cool reason to start a band that is pretty cool by its own regard. And you can definitely see why Ralph was going for this position, considering his voice definitely fits the mold. It would probably have been a great fit. But if there's one thing that Primal Fear are exceptional at, if there's one thing that they really seem to harbor a lot within their sound, is a good old school, variety of new wave of British heavy metal that overlaps with a power metal exterior. And it's something that makes for a lot of comparison points to be drawn. Immediately and instantly you hear Halford-esque screams on Angels of Mercy to start this album off. And immediately that's exactly who you think about. You think about Judas Priest, and in fact, whenever some of these intros hit and some of these basic riffs come up, you immediately gravitate back toward a band like Judas Priest, who is obviously a huge and tremendously principal influence. But Primal Fear has actually added a brand new trick up their sleeve over the course of the past couple of albums. Instead of just staying within the 3 to 5 minute range with their tracks, they have been going deeper, denser, longer. In fact, there was an album in the middle of the 2000s that boasted multiple 7-minute tracks. 2 albums ago, they had an 8-minute track. The last album had a 9-minute track. And now we have the new longest song in Primal Fear history, single song that is, and that is We Walk Without Fear, which goes at above 11 minutes. And let me tell you, this 11-minute track is very well put together. And it has enough framing and enough breathing that occurs during this composition. The atmosphere is one that's extremely rich, where these 11 minutes quite honestly fly by. As you probably know, if you've been kind of deep and dense into the metal universe, sometimes lengthy tracks have the opportunity or the possibility to just sort of meander a bit and not exactly fulfill the expectation that you kind of have whenever you see a elongated suite kind of populating right in the middle of your album. But this is when it's smack dab in the middle of Rulebreaker and does not break its momentum whatsoever. Primal Fear has always been sort of one of these good bands that just produce, above average heavy metal, that basic idea of heavy metal with that power metal secondary idea within there. And they don't get too deep into it. They like to stick with updating a sound that has been beloved by all of us since the 1970s, since Judas Priest, since British Steel, and they just make it bigger and badder and denser, and it works very, very well. I listen to a song such as like The Devil in Me, for example, and I immediately think of bands like Saxon as well. I like the fact that the registry tone gives me that little bit of idea, and really any time that you see these guys or hear these guys not necessarily thrashing their brains out or I guess riffing their brains out in this particular case, you can tell that they're going to have the presence of mind in order to keep things kind of well regulated. The soloing on this disc is very well done. It's one where Primal Fear as a band has always been above average, but this time it feels like they came out with big riffs in mind. They kind of came out to break the rules of the conventional Primal Fear album and try to give something that is very complete from first track to last, and they do kind of pull it off a little bit. It's one that does have a couple of flaws, but they are relatively minor, which is a nice thing. I like the flow on this album. I like the overall presentation of this disc. The sound can at times seem a little bit not so much dated, but it gets a little bit old for some listeners. This is not one that's going to be accepted and beloved by everybody as albums such as British Steel were in the 1980s. It's instead one that boasts just enough variety where it's going to coax in a lot of people to really check out the band and check out their discography and give them the proper shot that they require. I like the fact that this disc doesn't necessarily have to take too many leaps of faith or risk in order to continue to make just solid material. Somebody had asked me, what is the difference between when a band is on that nice plateau where their writing is very solid and a band that has become a little bit tired, a band whose sound has become very tired. A perfect example is Primal Fear right here. They have been purveying a very similar sound for many years. However, their songwriting on this disc it keeps feeling fresh whenever they come out here. And I think it's because they're willing to take that 11-minute long song risk, and I think it's also because these tracks all don't feel like they are cut of the same mold. You do have tracks that kind of change up the formula a little bit, and there's subtle changes right there that grant them that feeling of freshness as opposed to a feeling of tiredness or that a band has started to maybe fall off of the slope. I think there's a lot of groups out there, and a lot of them are in sort of the modern metal department, but also some aging veterans that should sort of take a cue and just try to, test themselves a little bit more and see whether or not something new and different comes from it. And as you can see with Primal Fear here with Rulebreaker, even the subtlest of change is something that could be quite noticeable and still keep the album feeling relatively fresh. As I said, this is an album that does flow very nicely, but at times the sound can become a bit predictable, a bit expected. But all in all, it's a really solid listen. If you're a fan of this style of music, you're going to love this album to pieces because it just delivers on so many different levels with big riffs, great choruses. The lyricism is the lyricism. It's passable. But aside from that, it's just a really cool experience and a really neat album. Highly recommend this. I would probably give this album an 84 out of 100. Fairly solid work included here by Primal Fear. We've had some great albums so far this weekend, and we're not even done yet. So stick around here on the CKN channel. Our next endeavor is going to be reviewing the next Black Tusk album, and you're definitely going to want to come and see the 5-in-1 review that will be coming early this week. 5 albums in one review. We did 4-in-1 about a week or so ago, but now we're going to do 5-in-1? I'm freaking insane, aren't I? You're going to want to stick around for it, though. I'm coverkillernation. Let me know what you thought about Rulebreaker in the comments below, and I will talk to each and every one of you next time whenever we talk about the new Black Tusk. Peace.